Hey there, Alex here from Nintu, and in this video I'm going to show you how to get started in creating your own layouts using some of the Winden settings as well as some of the defaults that we've defined here at Nintu. So, before we get started, there's really two ways that you can go about this. You can either jump onto our website, go into the footer or into the templates category and find the layouts, then find a layout that you like, click on the copy button, jump over to your page builder and paste it in, and you're done. Or you can build your own layout from scratch. Either way, I think it's pretty good to know what is defining the layout and what settings we have in there in case you wanted to copy some of ours, but then go change them and adjust them for your own site. So we're going to first build one from scratch, and we're going to build a 2-column layout using CSS Grid. So the first thing I'm going to add is a section. And the section will have two properties. One, it's full width, and two, it will have background color. So I'm going to drop in a new div, name that div section so things stay nice and consistent. And then as classes, I'll give it a full width, so w-full, and our background color. So I'm going to go with white, so bg-white is to set it to white. And I'll also be using dark mode on this website, and I want the section to have a dark mode variant. So I'm going to go dark, BG for background, N for neutral, which are our neutral colors, and then the shade is 900, which is the darkest shade we have of our neutral colors. That's pretty much it just for the section part. Then we're going to jump into the container. So the container lives below this. So again, I'll add a new element, add a div. I'm going to call this one container. And in the container, I'm going to define my container width as well as my paddings. So for that, I'm going to add max w-6xl. And 6xl or 7xl are quite good places to start when creating full websites that work for most types of sites. In some cases, you might lower it a little bit to like a 4 or a 3XL for things like just the call to action section where everything is centralized anyway. But for this case, we're going to go with 6XL. So you can see it's pulled it to the left there. And that's because it doesn't have any automatic margins on the left or right. So we're going to set those to be automatic, and we do that by adding the class mx-auto. Back to centered, and now we want to define our padding. So we're going to define the top and the bottom, which is the padding on the y-axis, and the left and the right, which is the padding on the x-axis. Now, I like to use py-32 for the y-axis. It gives us plenty of space, plenty of breathing room, without having too much white space or too many gaps on our different devices. And then I find px-6 works very well for our padding on the left and the right. It's not too much, but it's just enough that when you make the screen really small, our text isn't like squished up against the corner. That is pretty much all we need to do for the container. Now, within our container, we might want multiple columns, and in this case, we're going to create a 2-column layout. So we're going to add another div. We're going to call this one grid. And in this div, we're going to define our grid. So we're going to tell it, okay, we want you to be a grid. So we state grid. And we want you to be a 2-column grid, but only on devices that are larger than mobile. So remember, Tailwind, the way it works is very much mobile first, and it's a little bit different to what we see in the more traditional web design world, where responsively we tell it from top to bottom how to go about things. With Tailwind, we tell it from the smallest first to the largest. So if I wanted to say only have a 2-column grid on devices that were small to anything larger than small, so that would be tablet and above, I would say SM grid dash cols dash 2. And this is going to set a 2-column grid for anything that's bigger than the small viewport size, which is essentially tablets. If I wanted a 2-column grid on all sizes, I'd do the same thing. I'd just get rid of the SM and I'd just have grid-cols-2. Now let's say I wanted to have a 4-column grid on larger screens and a 2-column grid on mobile. The way I'd do that, I'll get rid of this. I'll do grid-cols-2. So all screens will have grid-cols-2, so 2 columns. And then for screens that are small and above, or medium and above, I can set the new amount of columns there. So in this case, I would go for SM grid-cols-4. Now, if we wanted to test this out visually, we could just start adding different columns underneath that grid. So you can see here, as I'm adding them, they start populating on our screen. So we've got 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if we jump over to the mobile, we've got 2. And if we go back to check what our classes are, we can see default is grid columns 2. And then from small screens and above, it has grid columns 4. The last thing that we want to define on our grid is the gaps and the spacing. That's pretty straightforward. So you just go gap dash whatever amount of gap you want. So I like to use 12 as a standard. I think it's enough gap without it being over the top. And again, you'll see if we jump over to our mobile, it's also added the gap between the different columns and the different rows. So back to our original plan, we wanted a 2-column grid for small devices and above, tablet and above, and a 1-column grid on mobile. So I'm going to get rid of these classes here. I'm going to go SM, so small and above, grid-cols-2. And I don't need to define the mobile one because the default is that it already has 1 column. If I really wanted to define the mobile one, although it's completely unnecessary, I could just go grid-cols-1. And then I can see in my utility classes that I've got 1 column as a standard and then 2 columns for small screens and above. But it's not needed, so I'll remove it for now. And then I'm going to go into here and delete these extra divs that I added. The last piece that I want to add are then my columns, and I like to keep it all named and consistent so it's easy to go back to. So I'll just add here another element. I'll call that a div. I'll call this one column 1. And then I'll add one more. Put it in the wrong one. There we go. Column 2. Now let's just say on mobile, I wanted my column 2 to be above column 1. But on every other screen, I wanted my column 2 to be in its default position. This might be something that you have with feature elements where you've got like a picture and sometimes you want the picture on the left and sometimes it's on the right on big screens. But then when you get to mobile, you want it to be consistently on top or below of your text. You can do that by selecting the column that you want to move and then defining on which row it starts. So when it stacks, they go from columns to rows. So at what row do we want that to start? So in this case, let's just give it a background so we can see what's going on. So this one I'll go background 500 and this one I'll go background N-500. And I want my green to appear first on mobile. So I'm going to go row, start. So on which row does it start? 1. And you can see it's switched it for the desktop as well because I've applied it for everything, but I want the variable to be only for mobile. So I'm going to then go SM, so small screens and above, row, start, auto. So back to where it should be. And then if I check my different device sizes, we can see when we get to mobile, the green one goes at the top. If I was to remove that, it would go back to the bottom, but I want it at the top, so I'm going to add it again. So that's row start 1. And then I've still got my small screens and above row start auto. And that's all you needed to do to get started with creating your own layouts using the Nintu framework with Winden on Bricks Builder. Quick reminder, if you did want to use some preset layouts, you could jump back to the Nintu Layouts website, go find a layout that you like. Let's say this one here, where we've got this fancy one big column and then 2 small ones. Copy it, jump back over to your page, paste it in. See, it uses the same naming convention, and you can see that when we jump then onto mobile, it switches the layout so it's stacked correctly. And if you wanted to go in and change that layout, you just needed to select an element and edit the classes that are in there. That's all we've got for today. Let me know if you have any questions either in the chat down below, in the comments down below, or on socials. Otherwise, have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video.